Hey everyone, this is Adam from Invisible Hand Studios. I'm up here at Discover Games. I want to talk to everyone about wet pallets, what they're for, and how you can make your own. So typically, what you want to use in the construction of your own wet pallet is going to be something like this Rubbermaid leftovers container. You can get a pack of 4 at Walmart for a couple bucks. No big deal. The purpose of a wet pallet is to keep your paint hydrated. It's also to provide a surface to make glazes and to thin your paint at a good consistency. So what I used to do is I would take your standard paper towels. People use napkins, the kitchen sponges. I've seen people use the big thick car washing sponges, and simply this is something to keep the water at a constant hydration. The next step, you want to add your kitchen parchment paper. There's a couple kinds of parchment paper. One has got a wax coating. You don't want to use it. This is your standard baking parchment paper. This right here is kind of how I used to set mine up. It didn't really matter to me that it wasn't neat or cut out, and it worked pretty well until I realized I had some issues going on. After a couple hours, the ends would start to curl and all of it would kind of ravel in on itself. Well, after doing a little research, I moved over to this, and this is called the AquaDry. You can get it at like AutoZone or Walmart, and essentially what it is a sheet to dry your car. It's like micro cell sponges, and what I did is I measured it out and I just cut it out to fit. Now what this is going to do is this is going to provide you with something that is going to be extremely absorbent, and it's going to hold that water for much longer than, say, your paper towel or your napkins. Now in the same vein, I also like to cut the parchment paper for these similar size, but I do it just a touch smaller, and here's why. When you add your water to the wet pallet, you're going to see that sponge is starting to rehydrate. Now it is possible to oversaturate this pallet, and when the pallet is oversaturated, you're going to have too much water. To find that balance, it's just going to take a little play, a little practice back and forth, because you don't want much standing water like that. See how it's running? You don't want much standing water in your pallet. What that's going to do is, as soon as you apply paint to this, it's going to become too wet and unusable. So, I'm going to get rid of some of this. And you'll notice, while doing the edge just smaller than the sponge, what that's going to do is it's going to prevent these edges from curling. It's going to keep your surface nice and moist, and you're good to go. Get those air bubbles out. What I like to do is also keep a little space around here. That way it allows that extra water to kind of sit, and as you need, it'll absorb into the sponge, and this will keep your palette nice, hydrated for a long time, allowing your paint to stay better longer. Ideally, you'd have a nice cap or lid that's nice and tight. And if you really wanted to, you could go out and buy a commercial wet palette. This is simply the Masterson's Stay Wet. It comes with what's called a cellulose sponge, which you can buy these for your homemade wet palettes. And it's simply cut to fit. Comes pre-cut, and I even trimmed it down a little bit, but you can see with these edges how I've cut my parchment paper slightly smaller than the sponge, and that's going to provide me a nice hydrated surface for my paint for many, many hours, even many, many days, as long as I keep my lid on. Alright, well, that's pretty much wet pallets in a nutshell. I hope it helped. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. Find me at Invisible Hand Studios on Facebook. Check out Discover Games at discover-games.net. Stay tuned for more.